everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm Rachel Siegel, the Director of Strategic Programs for Illuminate. Thank you for joining us from all over the world today. Illuminate is a hub for Jewish activism, leadership, and philanthropy, the donors and the doers, fueled by our shared determination to create a more just and equitable world in which all people are afforded the resources and opportunities to succeed. One of our signature initiatives, The Collective, is an active, ongoing community where visionary entrepreneurs and leaders collaborate and offer each other strategic support and advice. We nurture these transformational leaders. We call them jewels, Jewish, entrepreneurial women, executives, and leaders, by providing financial resources, fostering relationships, and offering educational opportunities that both inform and inspire. This cadre of multi-generational women tackles a broad range of issues affecting women and other marginalized communities throughout the United States and around the globe. Welcome back to our first Crown Jewel Conversation of 2023. This monthly series gives us the opportunity to learn from and with these bold and creative leaders. We believe that the integration of activism and philanthropy is essential to social change, and that greater impact can be made when philanthropists and activists form a true partnership together. These relationships are vital, deserving, and in need of nourishment, inspiration, and elevation. It is not only about financial resources, but also about intellectual and spiritual generosity. We believe that when women step forward to solve big problems, history can be made. We are all visionaries, whether we are the donors or the doers. We are the antidote to despair, frustration, and anxiety. Alone, we are a drop in the ocean. Together, we are creating a wave of change. When you support Illuminate, you not only support the 40 organizations that are in our collective, soon to be 50, run by phenomenal women, you are supporting a movement of these leaders. Our conversation today will allow you to get to know one of the incredible women in this movement. Analucía Lopezrevoredo, sorry if I butchered that, Analucía, is a Peruvian Chilean-American sociologist, born in Peru and raised in Spain and the United States. A scholar of Jewish and Latin American migration, Analucía founded Jutina y Co. in 2019 to offer Latin Jews from around the world a community in which to celebrate and explore Latin Jewish multiculturalism. Analucía is the recipient of the National Young Woman of Distinction Award and is a former Fulbright and Rotary International Scholar. She is a member of the Schusterman Foundation's ROI community, a Wexner Field Fellow, in addition to serving on numerous nonprofit boards. She is a passionate global citizen. She's traveled to over 130 countries and lived on 5 continents. If, like Analucía and Illuminate, you believe in nurturing the identity, leadership, and resiliency of diverse Jewish communities, then you're in the right place today. After our conversation, we'll open the floor up for questions. Feel free to write any questions that come up in the chat or hold them, and you can unmute yourself later on. For now, we are muting all participants in order to avoid any background noise. We encourage you, I know, as Analucía said, when people were coming on, it is lunchtime for some, maybe breakfast for others. Feel free to eat while you join. We hope that you will join us on camera so we can all see each other. Please bear with us today. We're short-staffed, so we're doing our best with technology. So I hope you'll be patient with us. And now, without and I just realized I've been muted.
No, only for the introduction of me, Rachel.
Great. So I'm bringing on Rachel Weinstein, the president of Illuminate. Here she is.
Thank you, Rachel. And hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome, Analucía. Thrilled to be in conversation with you today. What an impressive resume. And oh my God, your travel log. I want it. So that'll be a whole other conversation. Travels with Analucía.
Absolutely.
But today, we want to talk a little bit about you and the work that you do at Jutina Co. And I think the best place for us to start would be with its origin story. And, why was this organization created? And how did your own personal story play into that creation?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Thank you to both Rachels who took such a beautiful moment to introduce myself and a part of my story and said my name perfectly. I know that's a story in of itself, so I appreciate it. Happy New Year's, everyone. It's so good to be here. And I love this question. It's an opportunity to share a little bit about myself, share a lot about the why of Jutina, the history of Jutina. So I grew up in the United States. I moved to the United States when I was 5 years old. And I grew up in a very proud immigrant household. Spanish was our first language. We only spoke Spanish at home. And my parents did everything that they could, especially in a world, in a climate in which the Latino community was continuously being put down. There were a lot of conversations around immigrants were seen in a very negative light. And my parents at a very early age had it kind of made it their mission to make us feel proud of who we were, of our background, of our culture. And that was not an easy task. And I remember growing up and immersing myself in different things that I loved that were important to me, including Jewish community, and not having the ability to be in that space and also be Latina and also be an immigrant and also be someone whose first language was Spanish. And I think that always stuck with me. At a very early age, I became an activist, did a lot of work specifically to support the Latino community, especially with folks who are English language learners, was a translator at a very early age. So I knew that was always important to me. And simultaneously, so was being a Jewish organizer and being a Jewish leader, because my connection to my ancestral history, the spirituality that fed my soul through Judaism, those were things that were important to my sustainability as an individual. But they lived separately. Those two things lived separately, and they had to, in order to really flourish the way I wanted them to. Because whenever I would try to combine them, I would be met with a lot of obstacles. I was continuously, when people would ask, something would come up around my ancestral, being Peruvian, being Chilean. It was always a lot of questions in terms of, well, how are you Jewish? And when is it that your family, it became a bit of a interrogation piece. And as an immigrant, that already didn't feel good. I had a lot of resistance to kind of interrogation around fitting in. That had been such a big part of my life. And so I needed to kind of keep it more separate. I actually, for a big chunk of my life, in most of my spaces, I only went by the name Anna, because it just kind of made it a lot easier to not be Analucía, and it just made it easier to just go on to the next step of being integrated into Jewish life, into American life. And that's something that I've spent a lot of years healing from and having to really reclaim in a way that feels authentic to myself. But let's fast forward till about my early 20s. I'm a sociologist. And at this point, I had moved back to Peru doing a lot of work. And in that time that I was there, specifically working with the southern communities of Peru, the indigenous communities, I started to kind of bring in a lot of different Jewish traditions because I was living there into the spaces where there wasn't Jewish communities in the cities that I was living in. Many Jews around Latin America, but not specifically in the communities that I was living in. And I got to have a lot of fun being able to find ways in which to find parallels between traditions and use local ingredients for certain recipes that had been so central to my identity. And that started to kind of spark this level of joy that when I moved back to the United States allowed me to continue to create in different types of programs. While I was finishing up my PhD program, I entered the field of Jewish communal life, and never did I really imagine stepping into that space, but I did. And I'm so thankful I did so, because I realized that there was so much opportunity within the Jewish community to make shifts, to make changes, to not just be consumers of whatever Jewish things were around, but also to be creators of Jewish life and Jewish culture. And after about 5 years of working with different Jewish organizations, I took this huge leap of faith, and it was the greatest leap I ever took. And I said, it's time to create something that little Analucía was dreaming of. And that was the opportunity to be part of a community that aligned all elements of one's identity. So at Jutina ICO, we do lead with our Latino, Latinx, Latine, and Jewish identities, but we also recognize that those aren't the only things that are sustaining members of our community. And so it's really important for us to create opportunities for people to, by giving themselves the opportunity to lean into both of those experiences, to also lean into so many elements of who they are. And so that's kind of the origin, the kind of the why. This started in 2019, and it started as a project in which to, during Latinx Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month, or Hispanic Heritage Month, as it's known throughout the United States, which is from middle of September to middle of October. I had done many programs over the years to kind of raise awareness of different Latino identities. And I said, what an opportunity to have this, to lift up Latin Jewish experiences. And through that, I had the most incredible time. The people that I was speaking to were so delighted, and they were wanting more. And I said, I want more of this too. So that kind of led us into 2020, when Jutina really kind of took its launch just in the eve of the pandemic. And here we are today, getting ready. We just started our 4th fiscal year, and I've never had more fun. And the community, I just feel so blessed to be able to be connecting with people on a daily basis who have been looking for what we're doing and are finding community within our programs and our offerings.
That's amazing, and congratulations. I think one of the things that I love when I interface with you, our Jules, is, you are living your full selves through your work. And, it's not only passion, but it's also identity, and it's your whole self. And there's something really, really inspiring about that. And I think we learn about, what the limitations of the Jewish communities have been, and how much opportunity there is for us to grow and become more, as you've said, culturally responsive, which we'll get to in a minute. But,
Yeah.
We talk about the Latin, the Latino, the Latinx community, which is such a broad term, right? That encompasses so many different peoples. So, how do you define who are the Latin Jews?
Yes. Oh, such a great question. I think when people first approach or are learning about Jutina and would not identify as Latin Jews, they would say, oh, yeah, Latin Jews. If they have some form of understanding. Like I have a friend from Argentina that's Jewish. And Argentina has the largest Jewish community in Latin America. So it makes sense that if someone has some inkling of Latin Jewry, that would be their connection. And I would say, yes, that's one element of the Latin Jewish experience, right? Jews who have a connection to Latin America, right? Either by birth, like through their being born there themselves, through their parents. So that's one element, right? Another part of our Latin Jewish community are folks who have grown up with one Jewish parent and one non-Jewish parent who primarily identifies as Latino. And so that's another way in which the Latin Jewish community is also comprised, right? It's of people who have spent their entire life navigating what is the space that I can more easily fall into, right? Am I enough of this? Am I enough of that? When do I need to step back from here in order to be seen more in this capacity? And so that's another element that we pay close attention to. Other members of our community are transracial adoptees. A lot of Latin American Jews who were born in Latin America and adopted by white Jewish families in the United States. And it's been incredible to see how many folks have arrived at Jutina with that story and have connected to other folks with similar backgrounds and been able to do a lot of interpersonal work and create like different types of support systems for that particular experience. And I would say lastly, other Latin Jews are folks who have chosen Judaism or have returned to Judaism, right? And I'll get to what that means in a second. It's people who have grown up really rooted in their Latino Latinx identity and have decided that what's filling their spiritual cup is Judaism. And so they convert to Judaism, or there's a number of members of our community who have found that they have ancestral ties to Judaism, but that, their family at some form along the way converted to Christianity, Catholicism, and now they're finding their way back to Judaism. So we really make it ample because we know that the Latin Jewish experience is so diverse, and it's really important for us to, we don't have cosigners on people's identities, right? If you identify as Latino, Latinx, and Jewish, for us, like, we want to ensure that there is a place for you at Jutina Eco, because there's too many other places that are telling you you don't make the cut here, or you don't make the cut there. And so for us, it's like really important to look at the nuances of those experiences that I just mentioned, because we share a lot more in common than we realize. And that's what makes our community dynamic and diverse today.
Yeah. And within that community, there are so many different countries that make up Latin America, for example. So there's so many different traditions and histories and cultures, like even within all those groups that you said. So it is so rich and diverse. And I think we accidentally shared the wrong organizational website in the chat. So that's going to be corrected.
The website is
back
correct.
Exploring two different organizations that work with marginalized Jews in different parts, coming from different parts of the world. And you both start with a J, so it's understandable.
I want to add something about that. I do not take any offense. So the website is correct, jutina.org. Jimena was the first Jewish organization I worked at. So to me, and Sarah Levin, who's also part of the cohort 3 with me, is a dear friend. So if you haven't seen her recording, I would highly recommend that you do so as well. And we stick together, Jimena, Jutina, the J's, it's good vibes.
The J's, excellent.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the goals of Jutina Eco, and what are some of the programs you've implemented to help you reach those goals?
Yeah. So when we got started, as I mentioned, it was connected to Latinx Heritage Month. And what we created was a short story project. And that project we called Voces. And Voces means voices. And the whole point, I mentioned a little bit, I kind of dropped in that I'm a sociologist. I'm an ethnographer. I spent most of my time as an academic working with people to feel empowered to tell their own stories in their own time, the way they want to. So I think as someone who was a researcher, I continuously had to check my own power in terms of, I'm not telling people's story. I'm not the voice for the voiceless. People have their voice, and and there's different systemic experiences and reasons why sometimes they're unable to share them, or feel unsafe to share them, or feel disempowered to share them. So what can we be doing to kind of break down a number of those barriers and create a platform so that people can share their experiences in their own words the way they want to? That was huge. And so that's where Voces kind of came through. And today we have an archive with over 100 different stories of Latin Jews who are contributing to retelling or kind of owning the narrative of Latin Jewry, right? I think, like, again, as an academic, I know how the power that we have in kind of creating, this is the story of what this community is and what this community is. And it's so important to kind of take it back. We're in the 21st century. We've got access to media so easily available. Why not give people the opportunity to share their own stories in their own words and create some dissonance among some of the stories, and not make them all so parallel, and being able to really see that despite us being part of this community, we're not flattened. Latin Jews cannot just be assumed to be like a one-size-fits-all model. And so that's a huge goal, a huge value of what we do. And people are able to log on to our website and look at our Voces project, like the Voces section of our website, and see the different stories. Voces also has a podcast, and we're just began our 3rd season of our podcast. So episode 2 was just released yesterday, and we'll have a new episode over the next month, every Wednesday. So we'll make sure to give you that insight after our meeting. But that's a big goal for us, right? So some of the terms I've used before is decolonizing storytelling. That's a big piece, right? Like just kind of understanding the power that exists there. So again, like being able to give that power back and be able to reflect back the voice for folks. Another big part of our offerings, goals for us, is our Puentes Fellowship. And our Puentes Fellowship is, the longer name is the Puentes Leadership and Resiliency Fellowship. And it was imperative for us to create an experience that rooted both, not just Jewish wisdom. And I think the Jewish community has done such a great job of giving like an ethical perspective to leadership outside of like how leadership is taught. And at times it kind of creates like this vacuum, or like this idea of like, there's one way in which to be Jewish. And it kind of takes away, it sometimes leaves behind some other elements that also inform who we are and contribute to our why. And within the Latino community, the Latin Jewish community, a lot of that comes from our ancestral ties to Latin America, our experience with immigration, our family's experience with immigration, with dictatorships and wars, and the resilience that comes with that. And so we really create a program that pays close attention to also the values and the leadership that really comes through in Latino culture. And such a big part of that is truly like feminist leadership. And I'll pause there because I know we're going to get into that in a second, but that's a big part of what we're doing and what we're creating. And for us as a whole, you know, the reason why we bring together folks via Voces and via the Puentes Fellowship is that we really want people to see themselves as embodied leaders who have everything that they need to empower those around them, their families. We really want everyone to feel that regardless of what one's family structure looks like, there's always not just a seat for them at the Latin Jewish table, but that there's a role for them. So all of our resources are really created to understand that there might be a grandparent there that's not Jewish or is not Latino, but has the opportunity to engage in a way that is creating the space for future generations to see themselves as complete in that one space. And so that's crucial for us. And I think all of this kind of reflects back the idea of culturally responsive programming, meaning that you're looking at the individual and the families as complex, dynamic humans who are walking this world with an understanding informed by many different experiences. And so we reflect that in the curriculum, in our resources, and we adapt that too, like based on different types of things, feedback that we get from our community members, needs that they raise to us. And that's an exciting time. We're serving our community, right? And it's not the other way around. So that's thrilling for us. And I just think encompasses everything that we do at Jutinaico.
So many different tentacles, which is really amazing. What does it mean to you to be creating a culturally responsive community? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I was just mentioning a little bit just a second ago, and that's really about ensuring that everything that we're putting out, everything that we're creating is reflective of the experiences of our community. And again, like the Latin Jewish community is not flattened, right? I mean, it's sometimes can be when we look at something like a name like Latin Jews, it can, you know, at its most simplest form, people can just connect it as Jews with a connection to Latin America who identify as Latino. But for us, it's so important to kind of look at the different elements that are important to us. You know, we have there's a lot of things from within the Latino community and Jewish community that can't be ignored. A lot of patriarchal values, and we have to like name those like head on. And, you know, we're culturally responsive also in the sense that through these offerings that we've committed ourselves to, we are doing a lot of intra-group work. And what I mean by that is the work that Latin Jews need to be doing to really be supportive of a number of different groups within our community, different affinity spaces, or even within our own space that are experiencing disproportionately different levels of discrimination and oppression. And we create those opportunities for dialogue based on what we know. And so that's what needs to be culturally responsive, is really kind of situating yourself, emerging from the inside out, right? Less from like the outside in, expert to people who need the support, but really being part at the core and collectively doing work together. So that community-based approach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, obviously. And you referred a little bit earlier about the gender lens that you bring to your leadership programs. Obviously, we bring a gender lens to our leadership programs and the philanthropy that we do at Illuminate. So I'm curious to hear how you do that at Jutinaico.
Yeah. I mean, this is why Illuminate is such a great funding partner and leadership partner in everything that we do, because I think we align firmly with the value around like feminist leadership. And what that means for us explicitly is that, well, in terms of the gender pieces, when it comes to Puentes, our leadership fellowship, we do every year, we are continuously doing a lot of the intra-group work that I was just detailing. But this year, we're going to have a specific focus around gender justice and feminist leadership. And what that means for us is really looking at the different ways in which gender has been used against our community to control, to create different hierarchical experiences and systems, but also kind of taking a bigger step around like feminist leadership to really think about what does it take to really shift systems and policies and practices in order for more people to live with dignity, to live with living an equitable life that is also centered in joy. So those pieces are really crucial to us. And it's also interesting because within the Latino community, we learn a lot about machismo and the patriarchy, but what we don't learn a lot about is the matriarchy that exists within Latino identity, as well as within Jewish community, right? And so we really dig ourselves into looking at these almost stories that have become secondary to leadership within our spaces and within our communities, both personally and like historically, and really being able to center those as kind of being more at the forefront. So that's the exciting piece for us at this moment.
I love the language that you use, and I think it parallels a lot about what we say. I think we at Illuminate feel that by empowering feminist leaders who are working towards social change, we're not funding women's issues. We're not just helping women and girls. We're really helping to change whole communities, but through this feminist approach. So I think that our language mirrors each other a lot, and our not only our language, but our mission. What is your vision for an integrated Jewish community, and how are you working toward that vision?
Yes. So ultimately, like our number one goal, but also like I can just say mine, because that's really kind of where all of this began, right? Is the idea, our hope really is that the Jewish community, and starting with the North American Jewish community, because it's important to note that the North American Jewish community is an influencer of Jewish communities around the world, right? It's a reality. And I just use that language, and it's a little funny to use, but it's true. I've traveled all over the world. I've seen how the American Jewish community supports a number of different other Jewish communities around the world and how it sustains them. And what's important to me is that what we're doing here is also being noted. And what we need to be doing here is creating a universal understanding that the Jewish community is not the Jewish community and then these external like JOC or multicultural forces, is that we as a community are by nature a multicultural community. There is nothing about us that is not that. And like in terms of what does it look like to be part of an integrated community, it looks at all of the organizations and communities that we're a part of to take a good look at ways in which they've truly kind of made it, in which they flattened their own way of being, right? And I say this for everything. I think in many ways, in creating a Jewish identity, which I understand was like really important, and we've seen it throughout a number of different places, it kind of created a force of in terms of like, this is what a typical person looks like, a typical Jew looks like. And when that happened, it left folks who weren't part of that majority space outside of it, right? And so when I look at integration, I look at kind of challenging that more 20th century way of perceiving what Judaism looks like in the United States, and actually stepping into and embracing and centering the different things about Jewish identity and Jewish leader and Jewish community that make us who we are. So it's important to see our leadership reflected as in a multicultural space. It's important to see our education not just have a couple of external chapters that look at Jews from around the world, but that are continuously pushing themselves to be integrated in a way that every day is a reminder to students that we are a multicultural people. And it's not about like, oh, Jews from Africa Day or Jews from the Middle East and North Africa Day. It's really about how all of our communities have been instrumental to creating the universal Jewish community that we have today. And so that kind of like shift in mentality is what we're really pushing for, what we work for, what we work towards and with others, and truly being at the forefront collectively at the conversation around Jewish education with everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. You've achieved an incredible amount in 4 years. I mean, technically, if you look at like organizational structure, you're still in the startup phase of
Yeah.
organization. And yet, as I said, you've got all these tentacles, all these different ways of engaging families, communities, growing leaders, telling stories. And yet, I know that you also have aspirations to grow, going forward. So what are some of those aspirations that you have for Jutina Eco, and how are you working toward them?
Yeah, there's a lot of things on our mind right now in terms of how we want to be, where we want to be growing. So as I mentioned earlier, like we firmly sit in our primary offerings, which is our Voces Project, our Puentes Fellowship. We have a bunch of ad hoc programs that complement our educational resources, which we've created for almost every Jewish holiday that brings people together. And we're also like dreaming bigger in ways in which we can support our community. So we're in the process of building a rabbinic council of different Latin Jewish rabbis that can also provide a number of different support structures and a different type of spiritual guidance that I think people are looking for and might not even realize is accessible to them, because Latin Jewish rabbinical leaders we're here. I mean, they're across the world, but also sometimes like people, if it's not made super accessible to them, it might not be something that they're seeking. So that's really exciting, one of the pieces. And we've already have a handful of folks that we're excited to be working with. And that's one element. A different piece of what we're wanting to do is also continue to work to serve different localized communities. So right now we are a national organization, and we started in the Bay Area, and we primarily like sit on like the western side of the United States, but we serve people from all over the United States. And actually, I think I forgot who I was mentioning this to, but this past year, as we're preparing for our third cohort of the Puentes Fellowship, we had so many applicants from New York. So many. So it's like, okay, we need to actually have a local person in New York, because we've got a huge community that's not being served there, that's looking to be connected to what we're doing, and localized support just makes a whole other difference. So how that also can look like in Miami, Los Angeles, Berkeley, like those are things that we're continuously looking for so that people can have that different type of community outreach and experiences. And then, of course, we want to continue to evolve the different types of in-person program offerings that we have for all of our community members, for both folks who want exclusive Latin Jewish spaces, and then also for folks who are not Latin Jews, but have a stake and are invested in seeing Latin Jewry be a integral part to Jewish community. That's also how we're wanting to support allies in the space.
Yeah, you're going very quickly, and obviously the need and the demand is there, so it's amazing.
Yeah.
I see some people are starting to put questions in the chat, and I want to invite any of you who do have a question to please do so, or raise your hand and I can call on you. But one of our listeners and board members has asked, where your funding generally comes from.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Our funding comes from primarily national foundations. And we also have a number of foundations who are localized, so Bay Area and then also Los Angeles, that support the work that we're doing. And I would say, but then we also, this past year, we ran our first community fundraiser, and that helped us generate a significant amount of money for our coming year. And we also do a number of fee for service experiences, whether it's like through consulting or programming. So, but I would say that the probably 75% of our funding comes from foundations, and all of our donors can be found on our website under the About Us section. Yeah.
Amazing. And how are you marketing your programs to communities, and how are participants finding your programs, or you finding them?
Yeah. So I'd say like probably the way in which we engage with people on a daily basis is through our social media. Our media has been instrumental in getting a number of folks connected to our work in the first place. So people either find us first through like Instagram, which has been pretty robust since the start of the pandemic, or via, we had some series of videos that came out via YouTube. And then through our podcast, we've had people come in and listen in, which is pretty incredible because people find us, and it's not just Latin Jews that find us, right? It's also a number of Latino Latinx community members who are intrigued by our story and are like, wow, like this is fascinating. I want to learn more. And a number of Jews who are not Latina, Latinx folks who are also intrigued by our story and want to learn more. So the kind of those media is a big way in which folks come together. And we promote all of our events and our offerings via social media. Also on our website, we have a section for our events, and people who are subscribed to our newsletter also have access to everything that is coming up at Jutinaiko.
Amazing.
Mhm.
And what would you say is your reach? I mean, how many, I don't know, constituents do you have connected to you? Or, what does a typical program, how many people are you attracting, or how many people are following your newsletter, that kind of.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to, let's just start with like our resources. In this past year, our resources were downloaded over 16,000 times. So that's just to kind of give you like an idea of like reach. And our podcast as well had over 15,000 listeners. That's all time, but it's just kind of showing you like people are listening and people are curious and people are sharing. So that's amazing. When it comes to social media, like our Instagram, which is our biggest platform, has over 3,000 like followers. And I don't know the exact numbers because I try to stay off social media myself, but it is pretty large. That's not true. That's not true. Everyone loves social media. And I would say when it comes to our newsletter, we probably have somewhere around similar, like 3,000 people that are subscribed to our newsletter and who have been subscribed to our newsletter, who are still subscribing to newsletters, I would say. So
amazing. One of our listeners was curious about your specific programming for youth. Do you have specific programs for younger people?
Oh, such a great question. So we have done family programs in the past. We haven't done anything that's exclusively for just youth. It's not something that we are against. It's actually something that we're very excited about, and our look is like on deck for us. Not likely for this year, as I mentioned, some of the things that we're focusing on for this year, but some of those in-person programs that I was mentioning were specific to like family specific, because we do think, just like we have the Puentes Fellowship, how exciting it would be to also have a fellowship that's similar to folks that are under the age of 18, right? It's a different type of work. We're trying to test out some things as to what it would look like at different camps to have like a special weekend that's specific for Latin Jewish youth. We have like names that we're already kind of leaning into and pieces, but it's a whole other animal around just youth programming. But if someone is interested and wants to be a partner in thought with that particular question, I would love to have that conversation with you to see how we can get more things started that are specific for just youth and not specific to families.
Amazing. So a question came in, and I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, but we have open and courageous conversations. What for people who are not part of the Latinx community and want to talk about the community, is the best terminology right now Latinx or persons of color? Is there better terminology? Are there I guess people are sort of very conscious about language choices right now, as we should be. And so that was a question that one of our listeners wanted to ask.
Yeah, I love how you said that. We should be conscious about language. Language is important. Language has power.
Yeah.
Language isn't perfect. Language evolves. There's terms that feel very good for some folks and some terms that feel less good for other folks. And I think in the conversation around language, it's important to know intention and impact, right? Like the intention behind it and the impact that it might have, and also the resolution that we can, the moment of learning that we can have with individuals, right? So I always say that as a person as someone who identifies as a woman of color, as someone who identifies as a Latina, so I'll say that, I'll begin with that. Now, in terms of like the language for the Latino, Latinx community, wow, like what a great question. I think that there's also other terms that are used to kind of describe a similar group of people, right? Hispanic is a pretty old term that the census popularized, and that depending on where you live, it's still used the most. Like in Florida, people use the term Hispanic more than they use Latino. On the West Coast and in like Chicago, where there's a number of different folks of Latin American background, will lean more into Latino. Latinx is something that really has emerged in the last 15 years that a lot of Latino folks aren't down with, don't love. It feels very strange to them because you can't pronounce it in Spanish. The X feels very like American. And at the same time, it's a term that a lot of people do love and really feel that it's reflective of the shift in language. And another term that I've used today is Latine, which is it's similar to Latinx, but it's done in a Spanish way. So the E at the end instead of O is a way in which to kind of show gender neutral leanings versus Latina or Latino, it's Latine. And so for us, we know that members of our community truly have different experiences and desires from all the language. So whenever we're writing anything or whenever it is that I'm speaking about it, I'll generally take a moment to say Latino, Latine, Latinx, just so that people can hear themselves, like we're thinking of you. And also recognize that there's, even within our space, there's so many ways to do it. Typically when we write who we are, we say Latin Jews because it's a way of also just commemorating that last letter after Latin can vary for a number of different people. And it just allows us to get to the next piece of what we're trying to say versus just focusing so much on like what the last piece is. But we do love that conversation. We have that often with our community and respect the different things that come from our community as well with regards to what they need. So I say all of this to not give you a straight answer because there is no straight answer, but just kind of like that the conversation is important and that we as a community are having it ourselves. So we as a community haven't said, this is what we all want. So that also should just kind of give you some understanding that if we haven't all come out, and we never will come out with a term that we all love, that, we also are having oops moments amongst our community with regards to language.
Yes. Well, thank you for helping us to navigate that nuance. And as you said, the conversation is important. And I think the intention and the awareness about it is half of it, right? It's half of it.
I have one more thing actually I want to say about that, because you asked me about person of color. And I think that that's an important piece when it comes to the conversation around the Latino community, the Latinx community, is that while a number of us identify as people of color for a variety of reasons, for our mixed ancestry, indigeneity, Afro-Latinidad, there is a number of reasons why folks identify as people of color. There's also a number of Latinos whose all of their ancestry is European, because Latin America is similar to the United States, a place where a lot of immigrants fled to or went to for economic opportunity and so on and so forth. And that's important to note because it's complex, because in the Latin community, in the Latino community, we don't, even though racism exists, we don't really sort ourselves into racial groups, right? Well, at least we think we don't. And that's important too, because when folks are asked, do you identify as a person of color in the United States? It can feel, some people can very easily say yes, some people can say no, and some people can be like, I don't really know, because that's not really a cultural element of like how we discuss identity. We mostly kind of identify ourselves with like our national identity, which is true. So I say that because that's also a big piece. That's Jutinaiko, like a number of our community members identify as JOCs. I would say 70% of them do, but also 30% of them don't, but they fiercely identify with being Latino. They fiercely identify with being Latinx, right? But they also recognize that their having 100% European ancestry has allotted them a number of privileges, both in Latin America and in the United States, which is why they don't use the term, why they don't identify as people of color, despite other Latin folks, Latino folks using that term. So just to complicate things more,
Yeah, no,
I just wanted to put that out there.
I think that's a really important point to clarify. So thank you for adding that. I wanted to ask you, just lastly, I think we're sort of winding up here, just about your experience in the collective and how that's
Yes.
impacted your leadership and how you've leveraged the relationships of your cohort, in the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I love this question. I love my cohort, part of cohort 3, woo woo. It's been such a joy to be a part of this community and to be in a space that's exclusively for female identifying folks who are either, I would say, I think half of us in the group are founders, and then another half are folks who are not founders, but are executive directors and still kind of meeting a number of similar obstacles that we can all relate to a lot of those pieces. And we have like a WhatsApp group where we're continuously supporting one another and saying, I'm going to do this, like, wish me luck, or I didn't get this. And we were able to kind of like talk it out as a community. And it feels important to be a part of a space in which all of us, being a nonprofit leader is difficult. You're oftentimes at the mercy of someone thinking your work is important and giving you resources to do it. And as a result, that can lead to a lot of competition amongst folks who are trying to do really important things. And I have felt none of that within this cohort. I have really felt to be part of a community of women who reject scarcity mindset, who are really working to support one another, and who are each other's biggest, I don't want to use the term cheerleaders, but that's kind of what it is, right? Like, we're really supporting us and cheering each other on.
Champions, maybe.
Champions, thank you. We are each other's champions. And, we met the first year virtually because we were still in, kind of figuring out what was happening with COVID, but we met for the first time this past November. And it was like coming home to, your cousins that you haven't seen in a long time, that you've known, and it just felt so good. And I'm really looking forward to being together again.
Well, that's so
summer.
amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. We are so inspired by the work that you and your fellow cohorts do, and cohort members. And so to find, we always say stronger together, right? And that we can amplify our impact by sharing our resources and working together. So that's really amazing. I'm going to invite Rachel Siegel to join us again and help us close this program. But it's been such a privilege talking to you today. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much. Analucía, I love hearing you talk about the collective. It just makes me smile so wide and really makes us feel like what we're doing is the right path forward. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and your extraordinary story with us. And Rachel, of course, thank you so much for leading us through this conversation. Hearing from you, Analucía, we don't need to hope that we are making a difference when we have the right leaders like you to guide us. We know that it is happening in the United States, around the world. We believe in you and the leaders in your cohort and the other cohorts. We're so inspired by Analucía's leadership and her extraordinary story, and we hope that all of you are as well. If you've been with us before, you know that we like to share a few action items that you can take away with you, which we will email you out tomorrow along with the recording from today. We hope that you'll share this recording, and we have a full library of other leaders from our cohorts as well. So we hope that you'll take a look. We offer these sessions at no cost to you, but if you do find value in what we're doing, we hope that you'll consider 2 donations today. One to Jutina Eco to support Analucía's work, and one to Illuminate. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, we hope that you'll join us for our next one in our series, which will be on Thursday, February 2nd at the same time, with Rabbi Jenny Rosen, the founder and CEO of Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action, right around Tu B'Shvat, so very timely. Thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.